three scenarios to you. The only difference between everybody strip naked and go through metal detectors, the only difference is dignity. It's to achieve the same objective. And that's the reason why a conversation about digital rights is always a conversation about there are things that need to be done, but you cannot do them, you can't solve a problem by creating another problem. I'll give you an example. So, there is a hospital in Nigeria, I won't mention names for obvious reasons. This is a subject of litigation, so there's a hospital in Nigeria, massive hospital, public massive hospital, and I say public for a reason. They want to attend to customers, you and I, and they want to make sure that every information is collected accurately so that you can spend less time in the hospital. I don't know many of you like it when you get to the hospital and the person you're meeting at the front desk is writing, and then by the time you get to the next person you're supposed to see, they are waiting for the file. Nobody likes that. You want a case where by the time you get to the doctor, he can look at the screen and he can see information there. That's what they wanted to do. But in doing this, they partnered with a bank, amongst other partners. All of their other partners, the IT company, did their job. But what the bank did was that the bank created a back-end platform so that when people go to pay, so if you come for cough, you pay for cough consultation. It will be recorded so that when you get to the doctor doesn't diagnose you with malaria and give you something wrong. So they mean well, they meant well. But unfortunately, somehow, one of the technical guys working on this project happened to have allowed that information to be on the web and not on the internet. So what it means is that if you go to www.something.com/this/that, you can actually see the entire database of people who paid in the hospital for what they paid for. So when this was reported to us, we did a quick search. What was the first thing you would search for? The first thing we search for was HIV, because I believe that there are certain things that everybody agrees, this is private between me and my doctor. We search for it, and believe me, like I said, this is a matter of public record. Sometimes it's because it's important, so I can mention names. You could see the name of the person, their home address, their phone number, and the fact that they came for HIV screening. Thankfully, the result wasn't there. That's one example. And I see you laughing. Let me push it closer to you.
There's another example of when the Lagos State, the federal government did license plates. So you could just put in license plates and then all the details. So if you're driving next to a fine babe, you could just take out her license plate and then find her name and everything before she even moves.
So if you're a professional thief and you want to steal a car, just go to that database. You can tell which car, where the person lives, and all that. I've been asked to reduce my voice a bit, that it's too loud. I like that, because I have a bit of a cold, so I was wondering whether my voice was loud enough. Okay, now, the other example I was going to give is this. How many of you in this room have international passports? Okay? How many of you in this room have voter registration cards? How many of you in this room have your national ID card? You don't have to have the card, but at least you register. Because I know there's a difference between registered and you have the card. Okay? How many of you have a driver's license? How many of you have a bank account? Now, how many of you had to give your biometric information, all your 10 fingers, including your toes? I'm just kidding. All your 10 fingers, you had to thumbprint to get all these things. How many of you? How many of you have thought about this? Why is it that every time I have to apply for another public service, I have to give the same biometric information I've given all over again in a system where, how many of you know Nigeria does not have a data privacy law? How many of you have stopped to ask, before I give this biometric, you know what your biometric information is, right? It's your life. If for any reason we want to find out who threw that earlier bomb, and we get your information tied to that location, you are gone. You jail. We'll give you multiple life sentences. But how many of us have ever stopped to ask that question? Oh, there's no data privacy law. So why are we giving all this data? How many of you know that multiple agencies in Nigeria have lost information? One agency registered information through a contractor with laptops. And I will talk with this example. The intention is not to scare, the intention is to explain something. They registered with laptops through a contractor, and when you deploy 400,000 units and you finish the project, what do you do? If it's a project that you are not going to do again for maybe 8 years or even 16 years or more, what do you do with those laptops? Someone said recycle, someone said sell. So these guys decided, okay, let's recoup some of our money. They were going to sell this laptop. Now, one of the laptops that was sold was brought to us. On this laptop, you know what we found? On this laptop, we found a database. So apparently, somebody in their wisdom decided to sell a laptop that was not right okay. By the way, how many of you have technical backgrounds, either engineering or computer science? Okay, how many of you know that delete button is a psychological lie? You know when you press delete, you have not deleted. In fact, when you press shift delete and it tells you, computer alliance, when the computer says, should it delete this permanently, not even recycle bin? How many of you know that information can still be retrieved? So it's even worse when someone sells a computer with information that have not been erased. What happened to this person when they were reported? Nothing. Now, the reason we have a conversation about digital rights is because if care is not taken, three things will happen. Number one, certain people, certain agencies, certain institutions, and I speak not only of government, by the way, I speak of the private sector. How many of you have social media accounts? How many of you have ever typed this before? history.google.com. Anyone?
What?
history.google.com. Has anyone heard of it before? When you do that, you will probably do what I did. By the way, you can actually make sure, if you have a phone like me, according to NCC, everybody and Deadpool in Nigeria have phones anyway, so I mean, NCC is over 100, so everybody has a phone, which of course we know it's not true. But if you have a phone, do you know that your phone tracks everywhere you go? So if you go to Israel.com, for example, if you use an Android phone, even if you don't use an Android phone, any other phone you use for different platforms, it will tell you where you were at what time. So for example, if you're married and you have told your wife that you went for a conference in Abuja, like I did to my wife this morning, and for some reason she suspects, you know, women antenna, and then she says, let me see your history on Google, and she sees Abba. And what you said you were going to Abuja, but that's just Bible. Reality is that even though this much information is collected by many private sector firms to offer these services, as I mentioned earlier, for you to get Uber to come to the exact location you are, they have to get you to activate your location so that they can find you where you are. So when I speak of these three things, I speak not just of government, but I speak of private sector, even some of you. When people come for your meetings, you collect information you don't need. Name, home address. What do you need home address for? When I go to public buildings and I do this for fun, I go to public buildings, tell me to write names. You know the name I write? And I do it at times to have a conversation with the security guard. And I three questions I ask them. Number one, how do you know this is my name? And then they laugh. Secondly, how do you know I haven't taken a picture? Because big men, big women go to these buildings. If I want to catch them, all I need to do is take a picture of that page and I can call them, which is the reason why, as I speak to you today, how many of you know that there is a CD called 5 million most important numbers in Nigeria? Some of your numbers are on that CD. It's being sold. It's a breach of your privacy. But the reason why this happens, and I said I was going to give 3 reasons. Number one, digital rights are violated at times because people don't know what their rights are. You can ask questions. So for example, when many of us fill forms, they will say something like, you have to tick somewhere to receive adverts, and then tick somewhere else for terms and conditions. Some of us automatically tick both. It's possible for you to accept terms and conditions without accepting to receive adverts. Many times we don't know. It is important for you to know that you have certain rights. Your right to privacy. Unfortunately, yes, Nigeria doesn't have a data privacy law just yet, but there are instruments in place that Nigeria has subscribed to that makes you have that right, in addition to even some possibly agreeable sections of the Constitution. So one is, and I don't want to call it ignorance, because at times you don't find something because you're not looking for it. But if anything else, I would love for us to be, to ask questions. The next time someone says, give me your biometric information, just ask the same question. You may not have the right. If you go to an embassy to apply for a visa anyway, and they say put your 4 fingers. If you want a visa, you have to put your 4 fingers, right? If you want a passport, you have to give them biometric information, right? But just ask the question. Create some awareness. And I ask these questions all the time. And the question is, how do you store this information? One of those times I asked this question, and the organization invited me to come and see where they are storing the information to show me that it's very secure. That organization may be in this room, so I won't mention exactly what happened. But I thought that was very stupid. How do you show me something is secure? And you take me there. In 20, that was, I think 2 years ago, in 2016, if I can have access, who knows what's in my pocket? Sorry, are you enjoying it? No, you're not. Sorry about that. That's one. The second reason this happens, can you hear me? I hear you. I'll stay in the middle. The second reason this happens is that there are times when certain people who are supposed to get something done make mistakes or exceed their authority. A very simple example was someone at INEC who wanted to make some money a few years ago and sold voters' data. There are people that do that. Of course they will be prosecuted if possible, of course they will be fired and things like that, but because these things could happen, you need to be conscious of rights. The third reason why we should have this conversation is because the tension between security and rights will always happen. It is easy for people in locations where there are no security challenges to say, I want my rights, absolutely. But in a situation where people begin to say things that are hateful online, there will be 2 extremes. One extreme will be, let's ban hate speech. Let's create a new law and ban every hate speech, which doesn't solve the problem, because I can call it hate speech if I don't like it. And there's the other extreme to say, allow anyone to say anything they want, no consequences. So it's important for us to have this conversation from time to time. So if you remember nothing else that I have said, he's standing there and I'm sure what he's writing is shut up. Politely, by the way, just round up. Now, if you remember nothing, remember this. Digital rights are not just about, this is my right, if I get it, fine, if I don't get it, fine. Digital rights are about the fact that, unfortunately, you are now in a system where your rights are not the first thing that some of the agencies you deal with, some of the companies you deal with, your rights are not the first thing they'll think about. The first thing one will think about is security. The first thing one will think about is how to make money. The first thing one will think about is whatever they can get from you. It is now your own responsibility to be conscious of things like your right to information, your right to privacy or data privacy, and the more we are conscious of these things, the more we are aware of these things, the easier for us to move away. And I give 2 examples and 2 examples I gave. How did it get to a scenario where in Uganda, 2 things about in the last 2 months. The government set up something called anti-porn system. The government wants to check who is watching porn. And I do respect governments and their religious biases. But my question, honestly, is that the biggest problem that Uganda has right now. People are watching too much now. So let's make sure. At the end of the day, what happens with this thing, and has happened in Nigeria, 4 states in the south of Nigeria, the governors invited the acting team from Italy to begin to look for information about the opposition, people that wanted to be replaced as governors, invading their privacy, checking their phones, and doing illegal things, and they haven't been called to question, even though the organization has written about it.
Some are held by foreigners.
But
and some are held by
one more reason we must have this conversation is because the second thing that's happening in Uganda, of course, is that from July 1, now people have to pay before they use social media. How many of you would like to pay a tax before you use social media? Okay. The reason Uganda got there is because when such ideas are proposed and people keep quiet, unfortunately, they will act. Do you remember the frivolous petitions bill in Nigeria? The famous anti-social media bill. Do you know the reason why that bill was never passed? Because you spoke up. When your rights as a citizen are threatened by systems, by institutions, or by processes, it is your responsibility on your own behalf, on behalf of everyone else, for you to speak up. And there are levels of speaking up. We go to court when we believe that we have to go to court. And at other times, what you just simply do is you speak up and ask questions. Or, like I will do. But whatever you do, please, don't shut up.
You guys can see that you guys completely did it. When you asked me how much time you had, I was very minutes. I thought it was 15 minutes, but I didn't know you were coming to spend your time. And exactly the time I came. Now, because I've been somehow immersed in cybersecurity for a long time, I think I was speaking, I saw so many aspects of consider, as I said, it's extremely worrisome. People construct people's identity based on data. And the good data that is not usually advisable to give out are data that are changing, non-changing, like information. Many of you know that by the time you're a child, that your biology remains the same. So in a system where this is cultivated and prospered, anybody that is interested in stealing your identity, just look at BVN, SIM, registration, INEC, NIMC, driver's license, immigration. They will just set up queries across this platform. And we have known that some of these databases are not really secure. And someone can issue a driver's license for you and put someone else's face. Someone can issue a passport for you, put someone else's face. The same with give you a national ID. And now with BVN integrated into your account information, your account number, sometimes even the deposit. When guys talked about how you as individuals should fight this, but really it's not a fight for individuals. What countries do to make sure individuals are able to push is that they establish what is called claims, legal claims for you, so that you can rely on those legal claims to secure your revenue. And they are usually in the form of a law. So if you had a data protection law in Nigeria, it would clearly explain how to go about protecting your rights in relation to how the data is collected, shared, and used. So other than the cybercrime law, which we have, that would prohibit unauthorized access to these databases that have. I'm not really the one speaking to them. The panel is 5 minutes each. You say how you break, listen, you guys, the policy person,
two. Hello, 1 2. Hello, 1 2.
In, day out. There's a need for us to ask questions. There's a need for us to be aware, be conscious. What data are you giving to this person? If you don't have to give your home address, don't give it. I'll use my own personal example. I went to register a SIM with MTN. After the registration, the guy that did the registration came to my house. It's creepy. Like, it's very creepy. And he's asking the gate man, I'm looking for Nike. And I was like, okay. And the gate man calls me, Nike, there's somebody that is here to see you. I'm like, hi. What are you doing here? He's like, I really liked your face. You're very pretty. But it happened. It's not only me. This is not only me. I'm not the only person that this has happened to. So who do I hold accountable? No, please, it's creepy. No, your customer is very creepy. Why would a random person? You were told to do a job, not take. It happens in banks too. You put your name, your phone number, just because the cashier thinks you are a fine person or you have plenty money in your account, starts calling you. Hello. My name is this. You came to my bank. It's very creepy. But because there's no law to hold them accountable. And Paradigm Initiative and other civil society organizations have been pushing for these laws to come into place, and not just for any law, a comprehensive one. If you look at the general GDPR, it's very comprehensive. And there are fines for people who break the law. Big fines. So we need to be proactive. We need to ask questions. We need to know if somebody is telling you, give me your family history, you ask for what? Why? What do you need it for? Why are you asking me for this? There's so many places I go to. I'm just going to write my name. I'm not giving you my email address. Men will come, what's your phone number? No, I don't do phone numbers. I do email addresses. Thank you. Send me a mail. So this is what I'm saying. Let's be proactive. Let's ask questions. Let's be careful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. John. But maybe later on you give me the complete story of that guy, the backstory of that guy that came to your house. Again, how many of us know that every one of us that are in ICT, we're actually here for data? Data is the only reason why we do technology. How many of us know that? The pipes that are on the undersea cables, the MTNs of this world, everybody is here for data. Now, if this is true, is it not strange then that our country that seems to derive so much from ICT, we say technology has brought more than even oil, and yet we don't have a single line of legislation that sort of prescribe how these data can be harnessed and managed and protected and secure. Is it not strange? Is it not ironical? Now, how many of us know of the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation? Is a European law. It has direct effect in the member countries of the European Union, and is somehow constructively made to have a treaty effect, because I don't know any country in this world that doesn't have a European. We have clients in Nigeria that are asking, please, how do we become GDPR compliant? Some hospitals, actually. So what GDPR does is it turns your data into your own property. It says you are the owner of your data. And if you know the law of property ownership, all the incidents of ownership applies to your data in a network environment. That's the sort of thing we need to adopt in Nigeria. And it's only a law that can make this happen. One beautiful element of GDPR is what they call breach notification. So as a person or government agency, a business that thrives on data, every network breaches that you suffer that has any implication on data, you must disclose it. Not just disclose it to the individuals involved, but disclose it publicly. That is why we get to hear this company has been hacked, that agency has been hacked, and so on and so forth. We're being hacked all over in Nigeria, in Africa, but because we are not compelled to disclose this information, we don't ever get to know. Now, I understand NIDA has come in to solve a whole lot of these problems. So I'll give you a chance to, in 5 minutes, I'm not passing you, sir, to just tell us what NIDA has done in relation to this and how successful your enforcement approaches has been.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Valentine Udo. My name is Valentine Udo. And as he said, it's not okay. Okay. So, as we all know, I'm from NITA, and first of all, I would just like to highlight something Mr. Gbenga said about. I should come closer. Okay. About how a lot of organizations collect our information. The banks take our biometrics. NIMC, they take our biometrics. MTN, they take our biometrics. Everybody takes our biometrics. And as we said, it's all the same. It's all the same information. It doesn't change. So the first thing NIDA is doing is to make sure all this information can be in one unique database. So we focused on our data interoperability framework, which is one of the primary things we've been working on in the past few months. We did a stakeholder get together sometime last month. And it's actually very important, and it's very big that all organizations, first and foremost, must be able to find a way to make sure that their information is in the same format, in the same way, so they can pass through each organization and be exactly in the same way, so they can, each agency can actually talk to each other, basically. And also, there's something I want to highlight, and that there's always been this mixture of schools of thought, basically, about data and information. The internet is supposed to be available for everyone, right? But then there's also these people saying, no, I can't give out this certain information to people I don't want. And that's where the privacy thing comes in. So there's this contradiction between privacy, integrity, availability, secrecy, whatever you want to call it. But some people want it to be more available, while some people want it to be more secretive. And that is where everybody comes in. For example, the hate speech thing. People go online. I know a lot of you are on Twitter here. People go online and say, oh, men are scum. And according to the interpretation, that can be hate speech. That women are hating on men. Some people talk about other things. So I believe there are still some places that it's all up to us, and there's nothing an organization can come up and just declare, okay, we're working on stopping Twitter from Nigeria. That will never work. So that is, I just want to mention what NIDA is not doing, first of all, before I mention what NIDA is doing. And then also, in terms of big data and analytics, which you mentioned, NIDA is also, we've also taken the initiative. We met also sometime last month. We did a stakeholder get together to ensure that the big data and analytics in Nigeria, we brought in some private, some institutions. We want to make sure that everybody is included in whatever decisions and policies we are creating to ensure, first of all, our information is together, and then before we can now secure it. So there are already drafts in place. I'm going to give you an example. He talked about the ignorance of Nigerians, and we believe the first step to make sure everything is in place is awareness to make sure people are not ignorant. We want it to be, whenever you're giving your data or your information to somebody, people should be able to ask the questions. What do you want to use it for? How can you ensure the security of this data? You're not going to sell it to anybody. So for example, if MTN wants to collect your fingerprints or your number, and then you tell them, how can you ensure that somebody is not going to come to the front of my house and say I look good and they want to get to know me? And MTN, they're supposed to tell you, we're going to do this by vetting our staff to make sure that we have no stalkers, by putting penalties to make sure that if anything happens and you report it, the person gets sacked. Now, the next question, apart from that, is, are there SLAs? Are there written, is it written and is it in the public space that what you're telling me now is actually going to happen? So, for example, there are a lot of, I worked in the domains unit in NITA before I moved to the security department. And there were a lot of things we experienced where a service provider would tell an organization that, hang on, you people are owing us 100 million. We've provided service to you for 15 years. And they'll say, they'll bring it to NITA. And NITA would meet these service providers and say, where did you, who accepted this? Where is the written consent that this organization said this? And a lot of people don't have it. They have no documentation, but they can beat their chest and claim that so organization is owing them money. So it's always there that things must be written, and that is what we want to ensure, first of all, in the awareness part. And NITA is also endeavoring in ISO 27001. Now, there are plenty other security standards out there, but ISO is the international standard for information security, which we are currently implementing in our organization, and we plan on making this go eventually organization-wide in the government, so that as our information is being in a singular database and being spread, we are guaranteed that the information is being secured. Thank you very much.
A round of applause for NIDA. All right, very quickly, we'll call on Dr. Yao to have his own intervention.
Thank you very much. I thought you have introduced me. Okay, my name is YZ, and I work with the Center for Information Technology and Development, CTAD. I think my point of intervention is to illustrate the complexity of the problem that we are discussing. When Benga started with the question of how many of us were ready to do a strip dance, many people said no, or virtually everybody said no. And that was because we understood the issue of privacy offline. Privacy online is, however, something else. And sometimes we don't consciously think about it. And I want to illustrate its negative impact. Over the last couple of years, we've been engaged in trying to understand the gender dimension of the digital divide. And now, as I looked at this whole, I see that there's relatively fewer females than the larger majority of us that are male. And we are asking, why is it that women were reluctant to be online? And we found that issue of privacy was very high on the agenda. We had stories about marriages that had collapsed because of a breach of privacy. We have heard stories about women who have been raped, women who have lost this career, women who have lost this means of livelihood because this privacy had been compromised online. Now what that means is that many women fear to be online. Now what does that mean? Today we know that education is a right, but internet is the tool with which you can access that right. So if women are not able to go online because of fear of this privacy being compromised, then this right to education is also compromised. The right to receive and impart disseminate information is a right guaranteed by our Constitution. It's a right guaranteed by all other international covenants for human rights. But today that right, for you to access it and actualize it, you need access to internet. And so if women can't be online, then the right to education, information for them is also derogated. And so too, the right to participation in our governance and so forth. And so all the talk this morning about inclusion means that if we don't pay attention to issues of privacy online, we will not be able to address that question of inclusion. But it's not as easy as we think about it. I've also been involved in monitoring hate speech online. Now, what is hate speech? Hate speech is that specific form of communication act that invites its audience to condone or to commit violence against other people. Today, we've seen how that is freely being distributed and disseminated online. Do we ask government to monitor and stop hate speech from spreading? That would derogate our right to privacy online. Okay, so we need to deal with it, but we also need to protect our privacy online. I think that for me, the first most important thing is about awareness. When we interact with devices, we deposit our metadata. You visit websites, it clocks what time you have visited, what site you have visited, for how many minutes or seconds and so forth, what have you done? Now, a lot of us are not conscious about what we are depositing on these platforms. We are worried about the possibility that people would still misuse, mismanage data that we give freely because statutorily has been demanded. Like you go to the license, the ID card, and so forth. But we are also depositing data that we unconsciously give, and that data also is critical to our lives. So I think that first we need to be aware about the metadata we deposit and how do we control it, how do we minimize what we give And then, of course, raising that consciousness, knowing how important it is to our lives, would make us to become committed to protecting and safeguarding our data online. And I think that is how we can make progress, by getting everybody to think that our data online is our life, and we must act to ensure that whoever has that data can safeguard it, can assure us about what is going to be used, will assure us that it will not be misused, will assure us what are the mechanisms for sharing with others and why it has to be shared, and so forth. Benga had told us there's been no law. I think it's a challenge for us to be proactive. And that proactive is to shape the law that we want. If we don't shape it, government will come up with its own version. And government's own version would be more about what they think security rather than privacy. Government is concerned about security, and government is concerned, when they talked about security, in fact, it's not about human security. It's not just about the bombs. It's about regime survival, about how to protect governance. Okay? And so this own perception would be to bring a law that would be monitoring us online, derogating our own privacy, and that is why the challenge is on us to be proactive and to be able to shape the type of law that will control the data that we give, and therefore also to shape the sort of cyberspace that we want in this country and, of course, globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. He has brought a very interesting perspective, the perspective of gender inequality and the need for us to be on the driver's seat in terms of shaping what would constitute our data protection and security law. Now, we're going to have the last, and certainly not the least, intervention, but this session is really about audience participation. So I'm going to be strict because she's my friend. I'm going to be strict with her in terms of time. And then right after that, we would like to invite everybody from the audience to ask questions. And I understand there's also a larger audience out in the internet who are watching us right now. They also have questions. So, my friend is stepping as someone from his team would also relate to us some of the questions that are coming from outside. Ada. Please introduce yourself again for the internet audience and your affiliate.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Odotai. The good thing about being the last speaker after a whole lineup of amazing, prolific speakers is that they've said everything, so you don't need to bug me. You don't need to bug me for time. But just to reintroduce myself, my name is Adora Okoli. I wear multiple hats, so I'm an internet policy lawyer, but on the other hand, I'm also a journalist, and I run an online digital platform about tech and startups. It's called techcultureng.com. We also talk about digital rights and privacy issues. Now, as an aside, I just want to create a poser. Maybe Benga will be able to answer that. Or Mr. Odote will be able to answer that. When we talked about privacy and the intersection between privacy and security, but interestingly also for public officials, you talked about the fact that a lot of, like there was a hospital that put out numbers online, but I also remember when we had senators and their numbers were circulated online. Their data was circulated online by some online publications. So maybe you would answer that. Is that okay? Does that infringe on privacy, just as a teaser? But you also asked a question about why people ask for data over and over again. We have different agencies, different bodies that ask for data. Your driver's license, they ask for the same data. You go to do your national ID card, they ask for the same data. The simple reason is because data is a new currency. is a new currency by which people trade. So a lot of us, when we are supposed to, register on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, they tell you it's free. But in reality, it's not free. Because, there's no free meal in Freetown. There's no Osho free anywhere. So in reality, it's not free. What they're actually getting in return for you using that platform, enjoying all of those benefits, putting up all of those selfies and pictures online, is your data. And like, the other speakers have said, it's very important that we get involved. It's very important that we also hold the government accountable. This issue that happened with SARS, we have a lot of guys here. How many people have had a brush in with SARS before? Don't worry, they're not monitoring us, so you can raise up your hands. How many people have had a brush in with SARS before? Okay, so someone has raised up his hand. And I know that there was a time when we had this conversation online. People were trending the hashtag End SARS, Reform SARS. The reason why it got to that level was because a lot of us initially were not interested about it. If we had been proactive, and perhaps when the Digital Rights and Freedom Bill was being deliberated, we, pitched in as well, it wouldn't have gotten to that stage. It's actually an infringement of your privacy for them to actually look through your phones and get your information. Or for guys, a lot of guys, they look through your laptop. If they see you making certain transactions or going online, you're automatically labeled the Yahoo boy, and then they tell you, oh, we are doing our duties as policemen. The Police Act, gives us the right to search if we feel there's anything suspicious, but it's actually an infringement of your constitutional rights. And that's the reason why we actually need a data protection law, and also most importantly, a Digital Rights and Freedom Bill, which I want to use this opportunity to commend Paradigm Initiative for spearheading. Hopefully, we believe that the presidency would assent to that bill. It's been passed by the Senate and the House of Representatives, and hopefully the presidency will assent to that bill. And talking about even getting interested, how many people know about the Digital Rights and Freedom Bill? Hands? How many people know about the Digital Rights and Freedom Bill? Wow. Benga, are you taking notes? So we have just, how many hands again, please? Can I just see? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. So just 4 people, 5. Okay. And then I'll believe that everybody else here. So just about 10 people. Yeah. Just about 10 people in the room know about this. So it shows that we as citizens, Mrs. Obi Ezekwesili talked about, the demand and supply side. It shows that we on the demand side are not doing enough. We're not demanding enough, exactly. We're not demanding enough from the suppliers of governance. So I would like to close this by urging everyone to take a step, be proactive, try to hold the government accountable. If you haven't read the Digital Rights and Freedom Bill, please go online and download it and take a look at it and see how it helps you, so that we can also be part of the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ada. I'm glad I didn't have to stop her. That's how decent and ladylike she is. Now, Dr. YZ started this issue of highlighting how complex this subject matter is, and in fact, in Benga's presentation too, you would see that this is not an easy subject matter. Not every one of us can go to Facebook and say, well, I don't like your terms and conditions. I would rather you design one for me. How many of us know that when you get your SIM from MTN, you actually, have executed a contract? Those times when you get that packet, the contract is already signed, and is sort of monitored by NCC, and you, by putting that SIM, you've accepted the terms of the conditions of use. The same with Twitter, the same with everybody else, Google, and so on and so forth. That is why it is extremely important to emphasize that while as individuals we can ask questions, we can try and see how we can manage the use of our information appropriately, what we really need is a law. It's a law that creates the duty on the part of the provider and creates the rights on the part of citizens. So if we don't take anything away from today's event, let us take an advocacy point. The point is that we can petition government to come up with the right law that will enable this interaction between private sector and citizen, government and citizen, for the preservation and protection of our data. The United Kingdom is pulling out of the EU. We knew that. It's called Brexit. But one thing they did was, the effect of Brexit will mean that all the laws of the EU will now apply to it. They quickly, because 25th of May was looming, so to speak, they just took the GDPR and copied it, pasted it under their own legislative head and call it the UK data protection law. You know, so if a country like the UK can do that, I don't know why we shouldn't, because the people that are coming to our country using massive technology are coming to harvest and write on our data for their own commercial reasons. So if our government is not doing enough to protect our rights here, I think it is our place to push them to do so. Now I'm going to throw the floor open. I'm just looking spiritedly for a female hand, because Dr. Wise had said something about gender inequality. Okay, there's one to my left. Yeah. Unfortunately. Please, Doug, use the mic.
Cyberspace Studies in Nasarawa State University. I've just been listening, and I think the real problem is awareness. Because currently, thanks to the Senate, which the moderator himself is a member of the Data Protection Bill that is coming up by the Senate and Privacy Act, is already in progress. And we're going to have a retreat, and then we'll have a stakeholders meeting on that. And this afternoon, you're going to hear a little bit about data protection and the GDPR, what it's doing to us. And I've heard a lot about that here. And like they said, data is a big business, and who owns data? So I just want us to have that in mind. The only thing that, like the moderator said, we'll have to hold the government accountable to make sure, and our regulatory agencies, because the problem we really have sometimes is not having the law. The biggest problem is enforcing the law. We have NIDA, we have NCC, we have all these guys. A lot of things have been happening. Just imagine you pick up your phone, you bought your data, you make a phone call, and you be shouting hello, they take you a minute. Who do you report to? We don't have regulators in place. So just having the law is one part. I think regulators would be the key for the success of us even having data protection itself.
Thanks a lot, Doc. Of course, I'm a member of the Senate Expert Group on Cybercrime and Cybersecurity. The fact that I did not mention that doesn't mean I don't have faith in the that the law will pass. But Doc, you know, we have so many of those kinds of groups, so many initiatives, and I remember, I think it was
impacting project or initiative is all about this transparency, all about accountability, all about